Isolation is an understandably hot topic right now, and when it comes to depicting the essence of solitude, Edward Hopper was second to none. Hopper defined 20th century realism through Americana scenes with discomforting undercurrents, and nowadays, his remote subjects are more relatable than ever. This is Several Circles. On a shadowy side street somewhere in downtown Manhattan, nocturnal patrons pass the wee hours in a diner. Fluorescent light illuminates four rather absent subjects who coldly avoid our gaze, and one another too. Edward Hopper's magnum opus, entitled Nighthawks, is a picture-perfect portrayal of alienation. It goes as far as to shut out the viewer. Not only are we unacknowledged by the diner's occupants, we're denied awareness of the building's entrance. There's no perceivable way in or out. It's just a static snapshot of a New York night. Few artists have managed to capture the existential loneliness of city life like Hopper did. Lost in both thought and their physical environments, Hopper's subjects emanate a subtle, creeping desolation. Sounds familiar, right? Born in 1882, Hopper enjoyed a comfortable and supportive upbringing in Nyack, a town on the west bank of the Hudson River just north of New York City. In his youth, he would sketch the boats, ships, and ferries on the water, and his nautical interests would extend to building models, even forging a full-scale sailboat. Hopper moved to New York City at the tail end of the 19th century. After a brief stint studying commercial illustration, he transferred to the New York School of Art in the year 1900. He studied with the American Impressionist painter William Merritt Chase, as well as Robert Henry, who focused on representing the underbelly of city life as a leading figure of the like-minded Ashcan school. Both professors would guide Hopper's aesthetic, but Henry's tutelage would prove particularly influential to his concept later on. Hopper took 3 formative trips to Europe during the first decade of the 20th century. In Paris, he took inspiration from the French Impressionists. He adopted their practice of plein air or outdoor painting, and studied how Edouard Manet and Edgar Degas rendered the energy of bustling public spaces. Hopper's Louvre and the Boat Landing from 1907 and Summer Interior from 1909 are prime examples of his early style. Hopper returned to New York City and struggled to find success for years. He sold his first painting at the Armory Show in 1913, but it was more than a decade before he sold anything else. He made ends meet as an illustrator, and in the interim, he adopted an etching practice that would lay the groundwork for his most celebrated oil paintings. These works exhibit his keen eye for light and shadow, and hint at his proclivity for estranged figures awash in the urbanscape. In 1920, the American philanthropist Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney staged Hopper's first solo show at the Whitney Studio Club, a West Village salon that would eventually flourish into the world-famous Whitney Museum of American Art. While none of Hopper's work sold at the exhibition, the event marked a significant upturn in his career. He continued to entertain his taste for Impressionism by painting the coastal landscapes of New England in the summers. In 1923, he reunited with a former art school classmate named Josephine Nivison, who would become his wife and lifelong muse. Hopper had painted a series of watercolors during the summer that he and Josephine crossed paths in Massachusetts, one of which, called The Mansard Roof, was purchased by the Brooklyn Museum that same year. A successful solo show at the Frank K. M. Wren Galleries in New York marked Hopper's official transition to professional painter in 1924, after which he forged ahead with eerie moments of introspection, lonely interiors, coastal iconography, deserted New York streets, and stark public hangouts in oil paint. In 1930, the Museum of Modern Art acquired House by the Railroad, a painting of an impressive Victorian home. It was actually the first artwork that MoMA purchased for their permanent collection, and the museum subsequently mounted a solo exhibition of Hopper's work in 1933. It was 1942 when Hopper painted Nighthawks. The surreal absence of narrative context, paired with its mystery location, thought to be the synthesis of a former Greenwich Village diner and Hopper's imagination, made Nighthawks an acclaimed icon of World War II-era New York City. The painting was scooped up by the Art Institute of Chicago, where it remains to this day. While first-wave abstract expressionism, heralded by Jackson Pollock, Mark Rothko, and Willem de Kooning, would gain considerable popularity starting in the 1940s, Hopper and his naturalistic style persevered. The Whitney Museum of American Art had a retrospective of his career in 1950, and he was granted the high honor of representing the United States at the Venice Biennale in 1952. Hopper continued to paint into the 1960s, though his productivity slowed to a halt in his final years. Even as a young man, Hopper's process was meticulous and unhurried. He would sketch and discard innumerable iterations of a scene before turning to the canvas. He completed his final painting in 1966. Entitled Two Comedians, it depicts two performers, modeled after himself and his wife Josephine, taking a final bow before exiting the stage, consumed by darkness. Edward Hopper died in 1967, with Josephine right behind him less than a year later. She she left their estate to the Whitney Museum of American Art, where a number of Hopper's paintings and sketches are still on view. Thanks for watching Several Circles. Please subscribe below for more videos about the lives and work of extraordinary artists from history to the contemporary day.